Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Purity Cult Podcast. I'm your host, Nathaniel, and this week I wanted to do something a little different. A few weeks ago now, I appeared on my friend Liz's podcast, Deconstructing the Myth, and as with all things, there's not enough time to talk about all the things that you want to talk about. So I wanted to take this time to kind of follow up on a few things that we'd kind of started the topic of conversation on, and we didn't get a chance to finish. So let's dive into that. I've got three things that I wanted to talk about. Something called the relationship escalator and why polyamory works for me. Why, and I don't know how to quickly summarize this. Like I have a list of notes off camera that I compiled, and I don't have like a concise bullet point for this, but effectively talking about jealousy and monogamy and scarcity and how that influences our relationships. And then finally, I wanted to revisit the topic of consent, agreements within relationships, and boundaries. So let's start with the relationship escalator. Our culture, many cultures in the world are kind of monogamous by default. Not even kind of, they are monogamous by default. And a lot of structures within society are geared towards maintaining, affirming, and encouraging that kind of relationship structure. That being the institution of marriage, that being the terms of boyfriend and girlfriend, looking at media as kids and idolizing, Prince Charming, or finding the princess in need of rescue. There's a lot of things that point to and encourage the pairing of two people. Even thinking back to this idea of soulmates. If I'm not mistaken, you can trace this back to ancient Greece, and the idea that soulmates are literally, it was one soul that was split in two, and so you're trying to find your other half. That's where that phrase comes from. I had mentioned on the podcast with Liz how I've wanted deep, meaningful relationships with people the overwhelming majority of my life, and I didn't really have a term for what to describe that besides just yearning for intimacy. And learning more about polyamory in my life and finding that, not only is it possible, I'm not sure how to say it, but the light bulb goes off, being able to now think that I am not limited to only one romantic partnership, but I can have multiple romantic partnerships, and each romantic partnership has its own level of intensity and commitment, and that not all of these partnerships, these relationships, have to look exactly the same. Each relationship looks different because the relationship is the entity, and that entity is composed of two people. And so that relationship can manifest however that manifests. One of the ways that can look like is what's called a comet part. Not actually wanting to say a common partnership, but like a common relationship. Someone that comes into your life for a brief moment of time, is really, really intense, and then they're gone. Or the term situationship, or the term friends with benefits, or a platonic partner. There's all these words to describe multiple kinds of relationships. And that's where this term, the relationship escalator, comes into. And connecting back to what I was alluding to earlier, our society, our religions, they all encourage this pairing of two people, and that's it. You can't be paired with another person after that. The image of the bubblegum on paper that I'm sure we've all heard in youth group about, the more people that you have sex with, it's the gum sticking to the paper, ripping it apart, and there's less of you left over, which is just utter garbage. It's not true at all. This term, the relationship escalator, intends to highlight that from, basically the second we're born into a society that promotes and encourages you to be partnered to a single person in your life, without mentioning that there are other options for you. You don't have to be partnered to a single person. You don't have to be partnered to anyone at all, or you can be partnered to multiple people if you so choose. And this relationship escalator encourages us to do things that we may not otherwise want to do. It may force you into a relationship that you don't actually want to be in, because this ideal of married with kids, having children, your life will only be fulfilled if you have a husband and 3 kids, or a wife and 2 kids, or whatever that looks like. But it all revolves around this idea of a nuclear family, and that's the only way your life can look. You might be asking yourself, like, what is this term relationship escalator? Where does it come from? There's actually a author. There's a book called Stepping Off the Relationship Escalator who wrote this book, and the author's name is Amy Guerin. Apologies if I mispronounced that. And in her words, the relationship escalator is one of many social scripts, customs for how people are, quote, supposed, unquote, to behave, and how we should think or feel in certain contexts, situations, or interactions. These customs benefit many people, but not always, and not everyone. Continuing a quote from her website, when most people say a, quote, relationship, they usually mean something like this. A relationship escalator, the default set of societal expectations for intimate relationships. Partners follow a progressive set of steps, each with visible markers toward a clear goal. The goal at the top of the escalator is to achieve a permanently monogamous, sexually and romantically exclusive between 2 people, cohabitating marriage, legally sanctioned, if possible. In many cases, buying a house and having kids is also part of the goal. Partners are expected to remain together at the top of the escalator until death. The escalator is the standard by which most people gauge whether a developing intimate relationship is significant, serious, good, healthy, committed, or worth pursuing or continuing. In other words, the relationship escalator is what most people grew up believing, or more accurately, assuming that intimate relationships should look like, how they are supposed to work, and indeed, what any emotionally healthy adult, quote-unquote, should want. And that's the end of the quote from the website. And to be fair, that works for a lot of people. And it also doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for me. I'm fortunate that a number of people that I've gone on dates with are now very close friends of mine. And I'm not saying that that's exclusive to polyamory or not, but I'm thankful that by becoming aware of this escalator, by becoming aware of the forces present in society, that I'm able to step out of what that escalator might look like for all the relationships around me and allow each relationship to be whatever it is. I don't have to be pressured into a specific model if that model doesn't work for me, if I don't want that model to be the model that I want for that particular relationship. Continuing with a quote from their website, she mentions 5 hallmarks of escalator relationships, those being sexual and romantic exclusivity, merging life, infrastructure, and identity, as in sharing a home and other resources, hierarchy, as in that relationship is more important than other relationships around you, sexual connection, perhaps at the beginning of the relationship, hopefully throughout the relationship, and continuity and consistency, i.e. that relationship continues until either one of their deathbeds, and then you can step back on the escalator with somebody else. One of the nice things about becoming aware of the escalator is you can then choose to de-escalate relationships. You don't have to be forced to continue to move on to that next marker, that next goal, that next achievement that you have to pursue. If a particular relationship is only ever going to be, let's say, friends with benefits, embrace that, and that's perfectly fine. That relationship is no more or less important than any other relationship, simply because it only reaches a certain point on that escalator. That relationship in and of itself has value, regardless of whether or not that it ends up in an exclusive partnership. This idea that exclusivity is what provides value for relationships, I now take a lot of issue with, and is one of the things we'll get into whenever we talk about monogamy and scarcity, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. So I'm talking about the relationship escalator. I also wanted to talk about why polyamory specifically fits for me and why I've decided to quote unquote step off the escalator. One of the arguments that I mentioned on the podcast with Liz was how relationships outside of romantic ones aren't questioned for the amount of love that they can have. For instance, you can have 1, 2, or 3 kids, and the amount of love that you have for those children is abundant. It just continues to grow. Same for your friends. You can have any number of friends, and it's not like you have a finite amount of love that can be divvied up amount between those people. You have a finite amount of time that can be divvied up between those people. And that's where polyamory can get sticky, because yeah, you only have so much time that you can spend with any one person. And practically that does look like there's a kind of a cap on the number of relationships, of the number of partnerships that you can maintain, because the more you like someone, the more you want to spend time with them. And so that can kind of put an artificial threshold on how much that relationship can grow and become. So yeah, practically, like for me, what I found is that I really can't maintain more than 3 partnerships at a time. Scheduling and between scheduling between 3 people and me needing my own time by myself to maintain my own sense of identity, and just being an introvert and needing to take a break. Yeah, like I really can't maintain a bunch of relationships, but I know I'm not limited to the number of relationships that I can have. Like, it's not immoral to have more than one relationship. And that's one of those things that I kind of hope gets dispelled over time, is this idea that having more than one relationship is inherently immoral, because depending on how people date, they'll be seeing multiple people at the same time. They just don't, quote unquote, become exclusive until later. Like, in my view, looking at people on dating shows and similar things like that, it's like these people are engaging in non-monogamy to then choose one person to be exclusive with, but they are engaging in non-monogamy up and until that point. So it's kind of rich when people say, like, oh, I can never be non-monogamous, or I can't imagine why people choose to do that when they actively engage in that. So moving on to the next point, talking about monogamy and scarcity, which is also related to jealousy. Reading off my notes, one of the things I struggled with when I was transitioning into a non-monogamous partnership with Stephanie was, and I was unaware of it at the time, but that monogamy is tied to this idea of scarcity. So if someone does some other thing better than me, be it sex or having fun or dancing or whatever, it's really scary, because inherently within monogamy, you have to pick a single partner. So if someone is better, if your partner has, quote unquote, more fun with another person, that is inherently threatening, potentially, to the relationship, because, well, if they like them more, they can only have one partner. So I either have to perform better, or they're going to leave me. That's the fear. That's not necessarily the truth. That's the fear. And there's all sorts of things that can be said about secure attachments and secure partnerships and alleviating that fear. But when you're required to only have one partner, there is a significant amount of tension that can result from that. And that certainly did not go away whenever we opened up. And now that we've been open for a few years now, like, that fear and that concern is still there. I haven't worked through that completely yet, but it is in this idea of scarcity, going back to that idea of love is finite. By committing to monogamous relationships, or saying that's the only way that you can do things, it's this belief that there's a finite amount of love, and that can't be shared amongst multiple people. When what I've been learning in polyamory and non-monogamy is the value of the individual relationship, and being able to have multiple intimate relationships and them not threatening the other, because it's viewing the people as the people. I don't know if I'm saying that well, but it's viewing the people as the people without the benefits or their function in your life. It's simply, I like you. I want to be around you. I want you in my life. Tying this in with some of the things we talked about on that episode with Liz was the idea of taboo and anxiety and arousal, and that all feeling very similar. So taboos are exciting, like, both because it causes an aroused state in the body, which is either a form of anxiety or sexual arousal, and sometimes both. It can be a recipe for disaster in monogamous relationships, because people will intentionally or unintentionally toe that line, and it just floods the brain with chemicals, and it can feel, overwhelming. It can feel awful, or it can feel like, holy shit, this is really desirable. I want this. Oh, but I can't have this. And the destruction that's been wrought because of that. Like, being able to pursue something because you're genuinely interested in it, I think is a beautiful thing. And being able to remove that taboo removes a lot of the shininess of those things, and it can become pretty clear pretty quick that it's like, oh, actually, yeah, no, I'm really not interested in this. But when that taboo is present, I'm specifically thinking in the context of affairs, it makes the affair so exciting. To be clear, I've never cheated on my wife or any of my other partners, but I know plenty of people who have. And yeah, affairs happen for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons that they continue happening is because they are exciting, and they, yeah, like I said before, they just flood the brain with chemicals. But if you take away that taboo, that person or that situation that was once exciting is now dull, is now, just like anything else, and it's no longer a threat because we're not dealing with, I'll call them extremely convincing brain chemicals that encourage you to do a thing that ultimately would be destructive for your life, given the monogamous partnership. This has me thinking back to how Christianity discourages differently gendered intimacy, and how people aren't taught to navigate that attraction and arousal that just naturally happens between two people. Like I'm also thinking back to when I was studying to be a therapist, and how one of the things they needed to talk to us about was, yes, you will experience attraction to your clients, and it is unethical to be in a romantic partnership or anything outside of a therapeutic relationship with your clients. So having to learn and navigate how to manage attraction and arousal is a thing that you have to learn elsewhere that Christianity doesn't really talk about. They just say, cut off your hand or gouge out your eye. Don't even get close to it, which is, again, going back to taboo. It doesn't actually teach people to manage their feelings and regulate their feelings in a way that's healthy and beneficial, which I think fits in pretty nicely with what I was mentioning in that episode again, which was how a lot of Christian men really just don't know how to regulate themselves and need to learn how, because violent outbursts and just the threat of their presence, like talking to women presenting folk friends of mine who have mentioned just like simply being around a man who's angry is like kind of inherently unsafe. At least if they don't know how to regulate that, if they're trying to, if folks around the angry person are trying to de-escalate the situation and they just will not calm down, how scary that can feel. So all that to say, a lot of men, or just a lot of people in general, but especially a lot of Christian men, need to do the work to learn how to emotionally regulate themselves. One of the things I think is contributing to this taboo surrounding sex, is how the church handles sex from the pulpit, and how, it inherently is a taboo. I am aware of times where pastors will either, tell young ones to leave the room, or like as in the sanctuary, or kind of the opposite of like, hey, we're talking about sex today, and they're trying to be cool and edgy or whatever. And so the church has done a piss poor job talking about sex in a way that just makes it neutral, that just makes it a fact of life, instead of a thing that by the very nature of talking about it is arousing. One of the pieces of advice that I was given about sexual intimacy in marriage is going to a neutral space outside of the bedroom, be it a restaurant, coffee shop, whatever, to talk about it, to destigmatize a lot of it, and just to make it a normal thing. Like, because outside of the US, or at least outside of Christian culture, it is a normal thing. I'm not saying that the rest of the world is just like super sex positive and it's a neutral thing or whatever, but other cultures it is. It's just not a thing. It's not a thing to be embarrassed by. It's not a thing to be afraid of. It just is, which ultimately I believe promotes sexual health and personal well-being, because it's no longer a thing to be afraid of, that it's going to cause destruction in your life if it's not contained. So then what happens is, by the time it's time to engage in sex, either the people going into it haven't talked about it at all, or have such a limited understanding of what it is and how it works that it's incredibly awkward, or, laundry list of things. There's something that Liz had said on the episode that I didn't have the presence of mind to talk about then, but I wanted to bring up now. And it was this: I would argue, if you actually don't know what you want, you can't even fully love that person. End of the quote. And I don't think that's true, because there's a lot of discovery that needs to happen in yourself sexually, both like by yourself as well as with a partner. And there's so much to discover that you don't even know. And you won't even know until you've been with, I mean, to be frank, any number of partners, because each partner will be different, and each partner will evoke different experiences. So you're not going to know that you're into a thing until you've experienced that thing. And who's to say that your current partner, if you're in a monogamous relationship, would ever evoke that or be interested in that to know that you'd even want to do that. So at least to quell any fears of like, oh, I don't know myself well enough, therefore I can't engage fully in a relationship with this person. It's like, no, that's not true. You'll be fine, because there's plenty of opportunities to explore with this person. If you choose to be solo or monogamous, or there's plenty of opportunities to explore with multiple people, which is one of the things that I find beautiful about polyamory and tough is that, yeah, you can explore very different dynamics with different people because each person is going to be different. And that can be tense because, yeah, like if another person can do a thing that you either can't do or your partner doesn't find exciting with you, that could be a major blow to the ego, and that can feel really, really bad. So one of the things that I had to work through and reframe was this idea that my partner's experiencing pleasure outside of me is bad, which isn't true, which I think is also related back to this idea of scarcity. If my partner's partner does pleasure better than me or differently than me, not even better, just differently than me, then I need to be afraid that my partner's going to leave me because they quote unquote do it better. This idea of scarcity is directly tied to competition, that we have to outcompete one another for love for this one person because you can only have one partnership. Whereas allowing each relationship to be whatever it is, allowing each partner to give pleasure or have fun with your partner or yourself, gives room for all of those to just be whatever they are and not have to have fear that they're going to leave you because they do it differently than you do. Because your partner can enjoy both of you, and you can enjoy multiple, and you can enjoy others as well without that being a threat, because now competition has been removed because it's no longer about, well, I can only have one. On a good day, I experience that, but not always. I'm actually kind of surprised I haven't brought this term up. I kind of completely forgot about it, but there's this term called compersion. It's the opposite of jealousy. It's this, or maybe not the opposite, but whatever. This feeling of happiness and joy that you experience when your partner experiences pleasure and joy. It's like the polyamorous person's ideal, what they're shooting for, what they really hope to achieve or experience for their partners, because then it's no longer, oh my God, they're going to leave me, but like, oh yeah, hell yeah, they got to experience this really, really cool thing. That I can be happy that my partner has experienced joy, that I can be happy that my partner has experienced pleasure. Those are good things. Like those are things that I want for myself. So by extension, I want them for my partners as well on a good day. So in closing, this episode's getting a little long in the tooth for me. My anxiety is like out of this world right now. So I'm going to have to cut it off here. I know I didn't get to the third topic of consent and boundaries, but I promise I will come back to that in a future episode. If you'd like to hear more about the relationship escalator, I actually haven't read the book, but I'm familiar with the topic. If you'd like to hear more or like to read more, you can go to offescalator.com, where you can read more about the book and order the book as well. Support the artist. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for joining me. Always a pleasure to have you. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments. Comment, like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. And I'll see you soon. Bye.